welcome to our Mind Myself Mindful Health Discussion. Today we are talking about digestion. It all starts here. And I love this quote that we've been sharing for the last 2 months. The road to health is paved with good intestines. So yes, it's the root of everything. We have amazing practitioners coming with us today. And we'll see if Ariel's able to join us, but her daughter had a sting from a hornet and is being treated in the hospital for anaphylaxis. So we have amazing practitioners anyways who will fill in, and we'll see if she comes. So a quick overview of Mind Myself. Our vision is to cultivate unity in this time of divisiveness, and our goal is to help you become your own best health advocate and to help you feel seen and nurtured and supported in your health journey. And I want to say a big thank you to my team. As always, we are small but mighty, and just a sharing, over 56 countries, people from 56 countries have come and visited Mind Myself so far. So thank you for being here with us today. And also congratulations on prioritizing your health. We know that your health is important, but how many people actually take action on it, especially something as simple as digestion? But here you are listening to this presentation today and engaging. So I would like everyone to take your right hand, lift your right hand. That's it. And then pat yourself on the shoulder. Yes. Thank you for being here and paying attention. And Dr. Neelima is here too.
Sorry, I was late.
That's okay, Lee. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you.
And our goal is to have you tell us what you need. So we're going to be engaging in the chat throughout. And so if you have questions, we'll have an hour of our discussion and then 30 minutes of Q&A at the end. But if you think of your questions, take some notes or put it in the chat, because we want to know what you need, what you're thinking, and what questions you have. And I want to do a brief land acknowledgement. I am privileged to live, work, and play on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kakite, and Tsawwassen First Nations, also known as Surrey, BC, on the Surrey-Langley border. And no discussion of health would be complete without a disclaimer. So here we go. All the information and advice from Mind Myself and the practitioners is for general education purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information here and on Mind Myself website should not be used to self-diagnose or to self-treat medical conditions. We always recommend that you consult with a doctor or other qualified health care practitioner for individualized medical advice on specific medical issues. The views and values of each practitioner do not necessarily reflect the views and values of Mind Myself. Phew! Okay, now that's out of the way, I want to start us with a quote from Dr. Robin Chutkan. She says, "Digestion is the foundation of health. Optimize your gut and you optimize your overall well-being." And I would add to that, when you care for your gut, you nourish your entire being. So hang on to your hats and get ready for a fire hose of information from our people. And Dr. Neelima, Ariel was supposed to be one of our practitioners, and her daughter, you joined us a little late. Her daughter is on the way to the hospital in an emergency. Would you be okay to jump in? I didn't give you the questions ahead of time, but would you be willing to be one of our spotlit practitioners on the fly today?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know Dr. Neelima has been one of our practitioners on our very first 2 events. So we have a third. So 3 practitioners today, and I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. We have Sandra Lee, Bev Maya, and Dr. Neelima Deshpande. So let's start with Sandra. Sandra, please give us a quick introduction to who you are and what you've done with your career.
Thank you for featuring me and being a friend as well. So I have been a healthcare provider for over 30 years, starting off in massage therapy. Now I have transitioned into doing biofield tuning, so using tuning forks and doing by human design as well, gemstone healing, I like helping people understand what's going on in their bodies. The science of it can be imposing for people sometimes. So I like helping people understand and using imagery to give them a way to relate to the things that are going on so that they can feel empowered. Because sometimes when it comes to health, people can feel kind of disempowered or like things are taking control of them. I like to help the person take that control back and feel like they have something they can do to help themselves.
Thank you, Sandra. And I know you've taken a deep dive into the whole food industry and done tons of research. So we welcome that aspect of your research as well. Bev, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Bev Maya, or Bev Maya, however you want to say it. I am a medical herbalist. I've been in clinical practice for 23 years. I've also taught at the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine and have been their chair of botanical medicine for a year as well. Prior to that, I have a degree in chemistry, honors chemistry. I was a polymer chemist. I worked in control release technology and built the first hologram on the $5 bill, being a polymer chemist and working for 3M. I also worked in pharmaceuticals, in medical studies and medical information for a number of years, and then segued into natural medicine. And I did that training at the College of Phytotherapy in England. And it was a 4-year degree in a full clinical program with clinical hours and all the rest. But I was able to do it in 2 because of my science background, and have really just thrived on helping people with their medical issues. I worked for 15 years with West Coast Women's Clinic for Midlife Health, which also focuses on menopause, and have in the last 7 or 8 years also started a company called Wild Edge Botanicals, where I go and forage and make wild herbal extracts from our local indigenous plants, and I harvest them biodynamically, so from the different phases of the moon and the planets, and so that they're super potent energetically as well. So, that's kind of what I do. I have clinic and also do all those other things, and I'm here to help you out with anything I can.
Wonderful. Oh my gosh, we have chemists, people with a chemistry background. This is phenomenal.
The subject everybody is afraid of.
Yeah, I know. I sucked at it in high school.
Except chemists.
Yeah. That was the last I did. It was in high school. Dr. Neelima, tell us who you are, please.
Hello. Hi. I'm jumping in I'm a gynecologist. I've been in the realm of women's healthcare for over 30 years. I've trained in menopause and sexual health contraception in the UK, and I've worked in Bhutan as well. I currently practice out of Pune with my parents who are elderly. I'm a wild fit coach and also an ancient Indian martial arts functional fitness coach. So just jumping in.
Yes.
Thank
you, Neelima,
for talking to me. And I think following on from our discussion on Wednesday about gut health, hormone health, and its impact on menopause.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I know you didn't expect this, so if there's some sound in the background, we're just going to flow with it. So woohoo. All right. Thank you. So let's jump in with a quote from Dr. Vincent Pedre, and he says, "Your gut is your first brain, and it sets the stage for all other organs." And I think that's a fantastic way to begin our first question, which is, it's a topic, the gut microbiome and the gut body and gut brain connection. People talk about the microbiome. So let's just jump into a quick conversation about that. Sandra, would you start us off, please?
Scientists have finally realized that the microbiome is one of the most important organs that you have. And what I think is so cool about it is it's continually evolving and changing. Every bite that you eat has an impact on the microbiome. And then the microbiome does all sorts of things with it. And the microbiome is involved in all of your body's functions, from top to bottom. And it certainly has a big impact on how your brain functions. So we all know that it's important to pay attention to what you eat. What most people aren't realizing is that a significant part of that is actually the impact on the microbiome.
Thank you. Bev.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about this, but we were talking about dark field microscopy before you started, and really cool quote from one of my teachers. His name is Stuart Green. He did a lot of work on the microbiome because of its impact on the blood cell, the red and the white blood cells in the body. And one of the things that I think's been understood now is that we actually have like multitudes more bacteria in our bodies than we actually have cells. I mean, the comparison is if you could walk to your corner store and it takes 15 minutes compared to flying to the moon, that's the magnitude of difference of the quantity of microbes that we have in our body compared to cells. So we are mostly made up of water and bugs. And then we have some cells in there somewhere too, right? So of course they've now found that it's not just in your gut that we have these beneficial bacteria. We have them in every organ system in our body, in our brains, in our lungs, in our liver, and everywhere you look, there are microbes that are helping. We also did talk at the discussion before the webinar about how mitochondria, they now know that they have descended from bugs, and those mitochondria is what fuel all the energy in every single cell in our body. There is a really interesting book called The Second Brain by a Dr. Gershon, and he did some, kind of yucky studies because he dissected animals, but what he found was that the digestive system could function on its own without central nervous system intact. So we know that, yeah, it just kind of runs along and does its thing, and then maybe talks to the brain every once in a while. But it really is quite independent. The other thing that I wanted to mention was another lady who's not with us anymore, but made a really big impact on research. It was called The Molecules of Emotion by a Dr. Candace Pert. It's a book, and she elucidated that the immune system, the hormone producing system, or the endocrine system, and the nervous system are all one system, and they are essentially run by this microbiome. So if you want to balance your hormones, as we know that helping your microbiome being healthy is the very, very first thing that you need to do. So digestive health is paramount to keeping your hormones in balance.
Thank you, Bev. That is a perfect segue for Dr. Neelima.
Yes.
Go, Dr. Neelima.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was talking to my sister, who's a microbiologist, and we co-wrote a paper on biofilms, because biofilms are, they've become really important, especially with aging. You have a lot of elderly people in care homes, women, and I work in the area of incontinence and pelvic floor dysfunction. So catheters, continence care products, your mouth, the fact that a lot of the way the saliva is and aging and how it affects the production of saliva, and the presence of biofilms in our teeth, and tooth loss, gum disease, vaginal health, particularly as we go through menopause, the drying effect it has, changing in the pH of the vagina, and the amount of glycogen present in the cells of the vagina changes the vaginal microbiome, worsening the possibility of vaginitis. The way what we eat actually alters the microbiome, not just in our mouth and our guts, but actually the whole film that we carry around us. So we have a cloud, we have a microbiome cloud that we walk around with us. It's not just inside the mouth or inside the gut. We actually have it on our skin, hair, nails, everywhere. And it's a cloud that travels with us. And you end up creating holes in this cloud because of antibiotics, because of, the 5 Ps, I call them: pollutants, petrochemicals, pesticides, personal care products, perfumes, all of the contaminating P's, preservatives that create damages to this microbiome cloud that, are very unique. It's like a fingerprint to each one of us. And the damage this causes actually interferes with our digestion, our ability to absorb nutrients, our ability to nourish the gut bacteria that actually help us to manufacture a lot of vitamins and absorb and reabsorb a lot of stuff that goes through our colon. And then worsening the probability of leaky gut, inflammatory conditions, both in the brain as well as the heart, liver function, affecting our immunity, affecting reproductive function in younger women. Those with insulin resistance, we know they have a disturbed gut microbiome, and that affects the development of adolescent obesity, polycystic ovarian disease, thyroid dysfunction, and as we get older, fatty liver conditions in pregnancy and preconception times, affecting our ability to conceive, so ovarian function, and preconception affecting the prediction of intrauterine environment for the baby. So even the microbiome of the mother affects the baby's ability to develop inside the womb, the development of the placenta, which Professor Barker from Southampton also talked about, the intrauterine environment predicting long-term risk of heart disease, hypertension, Alzheimer's disease, etc. So right from the vaginal microbiome at the time of delivery, so how the way cesarean section affects the baby's microbiome, the microbiome that the baby is born with in its mouth and in its ears and its eyes and in the female baby's vagina. It's so precious, this microbiome, the vaginal microbiome, the microbiome of the mother, and our microbiome cloud has a huge, huge impact on how diseases evolve over our lifetime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neelima. And Sandra, let's carry on and then jump into let's talk about food a little bit in relation to all of this. Thank you.
Okay. What I wanted to add is that how I think and how I feel also impacts the microbiome. It's not just what I consume. So when I'm stressed, it has an effect on all of these little microbes. And again, it changes from moment to moment. So if you feel like you have a microbiome imbalance, like if you've had antibiotics or something like that, you want to do things to address that in terms of supplementation or what you eat, but also how you feel has a really big effect. And we talk about DNA, genetics. We have way more genetics coming from our microbes than we do from our human genetics. And then food. What's coming up to talk about is the frequency of food. I think of the importance of variety. There are a lot of people who don't get much variety in their food. They eat the same things over and over again. Recognizing that each of these frequencies is like a nutrient. And our bodies were designed to have a huge amount of variety of these nutrients. How many different types of foods, fresh foods, living foods, do you eat in a given day? Do you have just carrots and broccoli, or do you have carrots and broccoli and lettuce and kohlrabi and cucumbers and zucchini? All these different, they all have different nutrients, different frequencies that they are providing, in addition to all of the vitamins and minerals and all that stuff. So getting food variety is really valuable.
Thank you, Sandra. Bev, let's keep with this order for the moment to maybe talk about food from your perspective and herbs.
Yeah, I use this donut analogy, and if anybody knows a healthier food group that has a hole in the middle, then let me know. But the donut analogy is that we are open from the mouth to the anus, and every other membrane we are all connected. So if something's going on in the respiratory system, the urinary tract, the vaginal wall, it relates back to the digestive system and and all the other pieces. You could get a skin rash. Well, what does that have to do with my digestion? Well, it's all the same membrane, you know. So I've developed a questionnaire that's a membrane questionnaire, that it's not, you look through all of those membranes to get clues of what's going on with the digestive tract. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention, because, you know, when we look at the digestive tract, there's a lot of stuff going on there. The stomach needs to produce enough digestive juices to be able to, and stomach acid to be able to make the food assimilable, so you can actually absorb it. And then the small intestines has to be functioning so it can absorb all those nutrients. And then the large intestines are collecting all the water back. The hydration is important, and then having good bowel movements. And so if you look all the way down those pieces, and there are herbals that go along with all of those pieces as well, but that it's also important to use your food as medicine as well. So I find it, especially in our culture, we've taken out bitters. And bitters are so important for releasing bile. And what does bile do? Bile is our own natural laxative. And so if we can have enough bile, and it helps to us absorb fats better, then we're going to have better digestion just naturally. We don't have to take all these laxative herbs or laxative drugs, all those other things. My coaching with people as far as nutrition goes is to really take away all the packaged stuff, and using vegetables as our number one. You know, sometimes I've spent a lot of time dealing with menopausal women, and, you know, sometimes I think, oh, geez, you know, you're just like that 2- and 3-year-old that I had, because they're like, I don't want to eat my vegetables. Can I take like a greens drink? Can I take a green powder? Can I take a tablet? Can I take something else? It's like, no, you need to have your vegetables. Vegetables are absolutely number one, right? And I think because I grew up on a farm, and I think because people haven't grown up on farms and see just the majesty and the magic of how food comes from the ground out of nothing, that we can actually grow our own food and have a healthy amount of vegetables. But if you go to the grocery store and you're in a hurry and you don't put a value on your own nutrition because you don't think it's going to impact your health, then you're not going to eat well. And that's a really, really important part of it, is getting around those pieces of helping people to improve their nutrition. So as the other speakers have talked about how important that microbiome is, it's real live food that is going to support that microbiome.
I love it. And Bev, just before we go to Dr. Neelima, a question in the chat, and feel free, practitioners, to have a look at that. You mentioned bitters. I know bitters come in the form of dark leafy greens, any and all of those. Is there anything else specific that you would say? What does that mean, bitters?
Well, so bitters, it usually is the leafy greens, like putting some dandelion. I don't know if you've ever tasted dandelion leaf. Whoo! That you got to get them young, because they are pretty bitter. But like your arugula, or like rocket or arugula, it's got a nice like bitter bite to it. It takes us about 2 weeks to actually adapt our taste receptors to adapt to the taste. So when you first eat a new food, you might go, oh, that tastes really awful. And then as you're eating it more, you actually start to acclimatize to that taste, because you're getting different taste receptors. I know when my daughter was really young, I always fed her all the bitter things and sour things, like lemons are great for the liver, and it's does help to apple cider vinegar, like just being really plentiful with those sour, bitter tastes and taking out the sugars. You know, all those packaged salad dressings, they're all so sweet. You know, they just have so much sugar in them that you can't actually taste the bitter piece. So yeah, it's right on. Swiss chard, kale, like all those leafy greens.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. Quickly, and then we'll go to Dr. Neelima, because I know she's been on her own WildFit journey of healing too. Go, Sandra.
Is the sharp taste of radishes different from bitter?
Yeah, it's a pungent. So it's actually those oils can with continued anything heat, spice can actually irritate the colon a little bit. So you want to put those in, but, you know, sparingly, depending on where the digestive system's at. If we're healing it, we want soothing things, that don't sort of irritate it, but it still does have some bitter aspect to it for sure.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Nilima.
Hi. As a doctor, you would have thought that I would know a lot about nutrition and biochemistry, and I would say that I did wild, but I didn't. I stopped myself from studying really about my response to the right kind of nutrition until I did wildfit. And I wish I had done it sooner, because I think my dad wouldn't have had the problem he has. He has dementia. And if I had actually followed my instinct and done wildfit sooner, he might still be with me in his full capacity. I really believe that in human evolution, the human diet supported cellular nutrition. So if your cells are nourished, then the organs are, then the organs, and then the systems. To nourish the cells according to the way we would have when we were evolving out of Africa, then we would have eaten in seasons. So there is no such thing as a recommended daily allowance. It's a recommended annual allowance, because every season comes with its share of plants and vegetables and animals and hunting, and including the season of winter, which has fasting. So ancient humans would have regularly fasted. They would have regularly had empty stomachs. They would have regularly been on hunts. They would have included a significant proportion of animal proteins at least twice a year. So one in the season of spring, where plenty of young were available, and the second was as deep winter set in, where a lot of the old and sick animals died, where that meat was easily available. It was preserved in the cold and the snow, and it would have been a welcome relief from quite a long fast, where humans wouldn't have found plants or vegetables or anything like that to eat. And even roots were difficult to get to because the ground would have been frozen. Certainly, protein and remembering that menopause and aging is something that is quite recent to human beings. We now have a village, we have a whole colony full of aging people, whereas once upon a time there used to be one village grandmother who told the kids stories. And there is a lot written about the grandmother hypothesis as being one of the reasons why we as the human species are now so plentiful on the planet. The second reason was the introduction of grains, which came about 10 to 12,000 years ago. And grains allowed a lot more humans to survive. Unfortunately, they also brought their problems, because plants don't want to be eaten. Seeds are plants' babies that don't want to be digested. So they produce a lot of toxins to protect the seed. So you're supposed to swallow the seed and poop it. But what do we do in modern forms of eating? Processed food involves grinding these seeds down, so exposing all of the toxins to our gut wall. And one of the first things that happens creating holes in the mucopolysaccharide layer of the gut lining, where these bacteria are actually supposed to thrive on the sugars that are part of this mucopolysaccharide layer. Now, the introduction of grains and stuff that we now know as lentils and beans, which require a lot of processing and cooking and soaking and draining, unless we sprout them and convert them into plants, they become quite difficult for our gut to digest, and they can create a whole lot of digestive issues and problems. How does this affect reproductive health? That's the background I'm coming from. And when I look at wildfit and all of the women who've gone through my programs, whether they're looking to get pregnant because they've got polycystic ovaries, or they've got fertility issues, or they've got problems during pregnancy because of diabetes, hypertension, preeclampsia, or they're going through menopause and they've got heart disease, diabetes, or there's something like my dad, in spite of being healthy all his life, he's ended up with dementia, because our diets were predominantly grains to keep us alive, but it didn't say what kind of quality of life we had while we were alive. And I look at my journey with wildfit and I think, I have never been so clear-headed. I've never been so free of pain. I have never found it so easy to not think of being hungry. I've never found it so easy to be so confident of never actually having to deal with diabetes or hypertension or dementia, until I started to eat the way the human body was supposed to be fed. And it's a lot of variety of plants. Consider even my grandparents didn't have problems with vitamin D and B12 deficiency, and they were vegetarian. They just talked to you about the quality of the soil that they were getting their food from. So today, in our modern lifestyles, it's not just that we don't have the variety and the quality of food. I mean, ancient humans ate over 200 different kinds of plants. Today, you go to your grocery store, and you're very lucky because you live in countries where you get, a variety of, much more variety of greens. Today in India, yes, there's a lot of variety of greens, but I don't know how to recognize them. We've lost the skills of identifying edible plants. In all the monsoons, you come out here and the hills are green, and I know there are unique monsoon plants, but we've lost the knowledge and skills. Our ancestors never passed them on to this sort of urbanized generation. We go to the grocery shop and there's like 4 different types of green leafy vegetables, and that's because I live in Pune, which has got the monsoon season. You go up north to Delhi in the dry season, the most you'll get is coriander and spinach. And even those are, nobody makes vegetables out of them. Not every day anyway. So we're suffering with a severe lack of these amazing greens, the variety of greens, the ability to identify greens, wild greens that can be food, amazing food. We're also suffering with very poor soil quality. So the grains, the lentils, the beans, even if we do eat them, they're very poor in nutrition. Even if you do get meat, fish, and eggs, they're being fed grains. So the meat, fish, and eggs is also deficient. So we don't get the nutrition from it either. So
thank you. There's so much there. Thank you, Dr. Neelima. Bev, I see you want to comment on
yeah,
this
I think it's going into that next topic about the toxins, about the disruptors, the gut disruptors. And
yes.
One of the things that really popped to my mind was the Roundup, the glyphosates. I always say it wrong, but
glyphosate.
Glyphosate, yes. And they're in our streams, so the fishes are impregnated with it. It's in all of our foods. In Canada, we have the privilege of our government letting us be one big experiment for genetically modified foods. And, so our food is very, it's very compromised. And that's where growing some, I mean, if you have a little plot of land and you can grow something, it's amazing how much yield you can get out of a very small plot of land, like a box, just so you can grow a little bit of your own food.
Thank you, Bev. And just before we go into the next thing, let's all take a little stretch break. We've been sitting for a half an hour. Do what feels good in your body and take a sip of water if you have it. If you don't, maybe go get a glass of water. I know I need to stretch. This is my 2nd hour on Zoom today already. Oh, that feels good. And feel like, and shake it, give yourself a shake if you want to. So that's really great. Whew. Awesome. So we've talked about, just briefly danced into the gut health disruptors, and along the way talking about mental health and emotional factors, Sandra, which I'd love you to jump in, but there are so many digestive issues that have been identified, and I have a small list here. Irritable bowel syndrome or disease, dyspepsia, functional digestive disorders, food intolerances and sensitivities, SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, celiac disease. I'm certain that those are related to the topic that we're discussing today, which is we're just not digesting our food. We're not feeding our bodies the things that it needs, like the 5 tastes. And I had put those in the chat. Feel free to correct me if I didn't get those quite right, but salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and pungent. So, Sandra, talk to us a little bit about the emotional side of things, the mental and emotional factors that are involved in these diseases.
I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Now let's go a little bit farther. So I look at the digestive system as digesting not just food, but it also helps to digest your experiences. So thinking about the large intestine, the colon, the part that takes all of the food at the end and it absorbs what you want to keep, what's valuable. It packages what's left to get rid of it, and then it eliminates it in the form of stool. A lot of what it's absorbing at that point is water, because most of the nutrients are actually absorbed in the small intestine. It does the same thing with your emotions and your experiences. And doing body work with people for a long time, one of the things I pay attention to is the stresses and the traumas and the things that happened to people long, long, long ago that they have been healing their whole life. Mostly those people aren't aware of paying attention to that from the perspective of their digestion. And so many people have digestive issues. So working with this in a conscious way. So it's like the descending colon on the left side of the body, that's the part of the colon that goes out. And then you have the rectum where the stool actually comes out. That part of your large intestine is digesting what's left of your experiences. If you have lessons to gain from the things that happened to you, then you want to absorb those, hold on to the lessons, and then let go of the trauma, let go of what's left. The transverse colon, the part of the colon that goes from below the left side of the rib cage and it dips down a little bit, and then it comes to under the right side of the rib cage. That's the transverse colon. There can be things that you are aware of in your life that have happened, but you're not necessarily working on them. And then you have the descending colon, the part that's on the right side of the body that drops down to the area of the right hip. That can be issues where you might have things that have happened that you aren't even aware of. Things that are so difficult or traumatic or old that you just are unconscious of them. So to be aware that this digestive system is working with all of those experiences.
Absolutely, thank you. Dr. Neelima, do you have anything to say here?
I was just digesting that.
That's great.
With a lot of the emotional stuff that goes on, we have the primitive part of our brain, which is our survival brain, and then we have the part of our brain that actually brings us into the present moment, is conscious, is holistic thinking, and is not constantly trying to save us from danger. What happens when you're constantly in fright and flight is that it puts your gut as well into an emergency state. So being in the fright-flight state, as we are most of the time in our modern world, where everything is stressing us out, the fact that you get a phone call or you don't get a phone call, you get a brown envelope in the post, and it's endless, the kind of things that we stress about, and triggers your fright-flight response, then it draws blood away from the gut. And when it draws blood away from the gut, digestion is actually arrested in its many ways. All of the blood flow that actually allows the body to process digestion gets disturbed. And that is a key factor in the development of irritable bowel syndrome. The inability of the gut microbiome to actually meet the challenges of the food that we're eating and the leaky gut that we experience is all related to this chronic stress response that's causing disturbances in the microbiome, in the lining of the gut, in the gut motility, because there's autonomic dysregulation. So different our nutritional status, the toxins in our environment, and our hormone status, particularly as we're going through reproductive phases for women, reproductive phases of our life, and in men with metabolic syndrome, with obesity, hypertension, etc. There is a disturbed balance between the autonomic system, so between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and that results in something called autonomic dysregulation. And this autonomic dysregulation is responsible for a lot of symptoms that we see with irritable bowel syndrome. Gut motility is the movement of the muscles. Now, the intestine, if you look at it, is like a circular thing, but it has circular muscles as well as longitudinal muscles. So the way the gut pushes the food along the way is it compresses and then relaxes, compresses and relaxes, but it also has a wave that moves from start to end. And that's how the speed of the movement of food from the stomach into the duodenum, the first part of the intestine, then from the first part of the intestine into the longest part, which is the small intestine, and then moving into the colon, is affected by the ability of the nerves in your gut to regulate which circular or longitudinal muscle contracts and the wave that takes place to move it forward, so it's being digested.
Thank you, Dr. Neelima. And Bev, you've put a thing in the chat, the way you combine your food, avoid starch and animal protein together, I'm assuming, use herbs that relax the smooth muscles, chamomile, mint, fennel, all the carminatives. Maybe you would comment.
Carminative herbs, they have, you know, essential oils in them. So basically all of our savory herbs, marjoram, savory, oregano, thyme, you got to be careful with those because they're really heavily antimicrobial. But you know, basically all of your culinary herbs that you would use are carminatives, and they order this motility in your digestive system. So really helpful in IBS. That's because basically what's happening in IBS is those muscles, those smooth muscles, are spasming, and you have a loss of the appropriate wave, as Dr. Neelima was talking about.
Great. And Bev, could you comment a little bit about SIBO and maybe what herbs you might recommend for that?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I have a lady that helps me dispense herbs and send them out to different people who purchase them from me. And this morning we were talking about SIBO, and you know, I really do think that there's always a trend. There's always a popular thing that's happening in the health world. And first it was everybody had candida. And, you know, when I first started my clinic, everybody had candida, or they thought they had candida, because that's what everybody was writing about. And now it's SIBO. Everybody believes they have SIBO. And I think that and what tends to happen is that there are very, very strong antimicrobial herbs that are being used, like thyme, for instance. It can actually kill off your healthy bacteria when you use it on a regular basis, because it has a constituent called thujone in it, which is damaging to the liver with continued use, but also really acts like an antibiotic almost, right? So we have to be careful with these herbs. Also, there's other ones like myrrh, Commiphora mole. This is a really common one that's being used out there for SIBO. We don't need to bash our systems. It is not a war. It's not a war. It's a negotiation. We know that our microbes can morph from bad to good. There's a really famous scientist, his name is Dr. Enderlein, Gunther Enderlein, and he outlined the concepts of pleomorphism, which is about our viruses and bacteria actually morphing from bad into good, so they can be beneficial in the right terrain. So when you can think about our digestive system like a garden. It's the soil. We want to make that soil conducive for healthy, happy bacteria to support us. So I'm really against using very strong antimicrobial herbs for things like SIBO, and much more interested in using herbs like plantain. Plantain's always the very first one, and it's not the banana plantain. We have a local herb called plantain, or ribwort it's called. It grows absolutely everywhere. It's a fantastic first aid herb. It often grows on walkways because it's there for you to use. Like you have a cut, you can pull up some plantain, chew it in your mouth and put it right on the cut. It's called a spit poultice, and your own healthy bacteria will support the detoxification of that cut. You can think about that happening in your digestive tract. That plantain is the first herb to use to draw the toxins out of the digestive tract. And then you add things that contain mucilage that actually can heal the gut, like slippery elm, like marshmallow root or leaf. You can grow these very easily, the marshmallow root and leaf. I've got a monstrous plant in my backyard. Echinacea, you know, we think of echinacea as immune. It is one of the #1 herbs I use for all of the membranes to heal. It really helps to reverse that dysbiosis. It breaks down pathogenic or bad biofilm where the microbes are hiding. And so it really can make a big difference. And then the other one that's quite important are the berberine containing herbs. And that's a lot of people think about golden seal, but golden seal, unfortunately, because we don't have many of our first growth forests anymore, we can't grow. It doesn't grow in the wild anymore, and it's been really over harvested. So I tend not to use golden seal, but I use a herb called Oregon grape, which grows everywhere on the West Coast. Like Oregon grape, the root is fabulous for healing the gut because of these berberines. And it was interesting in what Dr. Neelama said, because she talked about the biofilm and insulin resistance. And berberine, multiple studies has been shown to improve insulin resistance as well. So all these berberine containing herbs. And then the very last one, and this is an easy one, everybody can do this, astringents. Astringents are usually from a thing called tannins. And what do we know tannins from?
Wine.
What have you heard that? Pardon me? Wine. And what do we use tannins for? Like in an industry where they're using animal hides, what do tannins do?
They cure the hide.
Yeah, they toughen it. They actually coagulate the proteins. So also what tannins do in the gut is they'll help to heal that dysbiosis, that leaky gut. So something as easy as drinking a rooibos tea. You know, rooibos has a ton of astringents, no caffeine, fabulous thing to get a hold of and drink regularly to improve the integrity of your digestive tract. You just don't really want to overdo it. You know, I trained in England, and over there, you know, black tea is a thing. And I interviewed one older fellow that he drank 2 entire pots of tea in a morning. And I thought, okay, he's malnourished because he's not digesting anything, because his proteins in his membranes are so locked up because he's drinking too much tea. So you got to be careful with that.
Amazing. So what I'm hearing is that every person is an individual. Absolutely. And there are solutions out there, but you need to consult with somebody or do some reading. And Bev, do you have, I think somebody put a book, it might have been you. Is there a book or two that we could go and look for some solutions just before we consult a practitioner and just go, okay, let me try some of these in moderation first? Do you have any recommendations?
Oh, the herbal, like a good herbal book, like a first herbal book.
Totally.
You know, most of the ones, there's a bunch of really great books by a fellow named Matthew Wood. I really love his books because he takes into account the energetics of the herbs. This is the thing, is that, you know, as a chemist, I started off, it's all about the chemicals, right? Like, I'm a chemist, I can figure this out. I know these constituents, right? But the part that is missing and historically has always been there in folk medicines is the humoral parts, the energetics, which is extremely important. I had listed a book earlier on that is the energetics for food. They do have medicinal herbs in there as well. So what you have to look at is, for an example, we're generally in a cold, damp environment. So a lot of the things that we get tend to be cold and damp. We need to count. That's why raw foodists don't do very well on the West Coast, because they're raw, like cold, raw foods will make the cold and damp even worse. Right. Whereas in tropical countries, it's a totally different thing. So you need to look at your energetics of the plants too. And Matthew Wood includes all of that within his herbal books.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Sandra, would you be willing to talk a little bit more about the energy, the energy of food, the energy of sleep and remedies, and the work that you do with biofield tuning?
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different aspects of that to talk about.
You pick one.
So let me talk about how I work with energy in the body in general, and then we can talk about what interferes with it. So I look at it that I want energy to be moving smoothly through, from the earth through my body and out the top of the head, and from out in the heavens into my head, through my body, and connecting me to the earth. Things work more effectively and smoothly when I am in the flow, when that energy is moving through. Anytime anything comes up that creates fear, confusion, doubt, overwhelm, and emotional, but also foods. Thinking about that little girl who got stung by a hornet today, and her system is not in the flow. Something like that happens. Any trauma happens, even if it's eating a food that causes a reaction. Instead of having this nice flow, there's stuck. The energy is not moving. And when the energy is not moving, I can't function. And the example I use to illustrate this is, I'm walking along and my energy is flowing and everything is going good, and then I stub my toe. And I limp. It hurts. And in that toe, in that foot, all the way up the hip, possibly farther in the body, the energy is no longer flowing. It's stuck. And for me to be able to go back to being able to walk smoothly again, I have to wait for that stubbed toe to heal so it's no longer hurting me, so I can stand on it, have weight on it, and my energy can get back to flowing again. One of the things I do with biofield tuning, using my tuning forks and sound, is I help that blocked flow to be able to move again. And sometimes it's physical things that have happened that are blocking that. But sometimes it's thought processes, emotions, beliefs, stresses that have that energy getting stuck. And so working with the person to help them return to being in that flow. And when people receive really any sort of healing work, it's possible that they leave feeling relaxed. They were stressed, tight muscles, pain, and then they leave and they're more flowing. Their energy is able to flow better. And that just makes so much difference in terms of all aspects of health. Dr. Nilima was talking about, what happens when we have stress or fear or danger so prevalent in the world for the past 3 years. Continual state of fear and pressure and anxiety and worry that has been imposed on us. And it causes everyone's energy to, instead of being nice and flowing, to get all chopped up and stuck. Unless you're people like, Esther and us here, who purposely allow ourselves to return to the flow. Dr. Nilima was talking about how digestion shuts down when we have these stress states. There's this whole fight or flight system that you may have heard of. When you are being chased by a bear and you are in danger of not making it for the next hour, it doesn't matter if your digestion doesn't work, or your immune system doesn't work, or your brain doesn't work. When you are running from bear or fighting the bear off, the priority is survival. And your muscles get all, they get all the blood, and your brain, your digestion, and your immune system get turned down. Look at the impact of that on us with 3+ years of ongoing, persistent background levels of stress. This affects everyone's health.
Thank you, Sandra. Dr. Nilima, I know that you, in your treating and consulting with your clients and patients, you must talk about energy as well.
Mm-hmm. Energy in terms of what you eat, so the kind of food you eat. Are you talking about that energy? I talk to them a lot about eating right.
However, yeah, let's talk about that. Eating right and how they feel about that when you start to implement these things. And we're coming to near the end of our talk here.
I like they teach quite a lot to us, getting physical, and even when we're talking about physical needs, going back to basics, which is again getting the breathing right, getting hydration right, getting sunlight exposure, getting sleep sorted out, getting a good sleep routine, getting our physical need for touch, because that lowers stress immensely, and then addressing nutrition. So we're eating fresh, living, great variety food that feeds our microbiome, getting our emotional needs, need for connection. We're a human tribe that thrives on connection with each other. Men and women are, we don't talk about men and women, but yes, the part of our species that are predominantly testosterone led, and the species which are predominantly led by estrogen and progesterone, they have different brains because of the cyclicity of hormones, and their emotional needs are different. So getting those emotional needs met, those also complete, these are foundations of our health, and they are connected to how we use our energy to live our lives optimally. So I take my patients back to basics.
Mhm.
Fantastic. We are going to continue, and I just want to break in here for a brief moment. We are going to continue on with a question and answer session, and I was just scrolling the chat. There are a number of things to talk about, and we're going to make that live. Just before we do, for those who have to leave on the top of the hour, I want to show a brief offer for our next event coming up. So we will have more from the practitioners moment. This has been awesome. We could talk for hours. This is amazing. So I'm going to share my screen with you briefly, and I'm going to share 4 slides. So give me one moment here. And here we come up. Slideshow is coming. And tell me if you can see that screen share. Does it, can you see my slides? Yes, okay.
Yes.
All right. So here we go. For our next event, which is on November 3rd, it's called Balancing Body and Being. So we're going to continue this conversation, holistic approaches to metabolism and weight management. We haven't really dived into weight management here. So we're going to carry this conversation on with 3 practitioners, things like metabolism and gut-brain axis and debunking some common myths, etc. So for people who sign up today,
Esther, I think we're just seeing your beautiful lavender fields and
It's
trees.
beautiful.
oh my goodness, beautiful lavender fields and trees. Okay, so I started the slideshow and then it didn't do it. So let's,
There it is. There it
yeah,
is.
so you're gonna see my slides on the left. Don't worry about it. So if you sign up today, I just want to show you this, and you're gonna see a little small thing. I have 3 of these amazing pillow blankets to give away, and they're from one of our sponsors, which is Spread to Love. You saw it as the gift basket company. They're just transitioning. And Bill, my Vanna, so that's awesome. So they're really tall. Bill, it's almost Bill's height. So there are 3 of these to give away today if you sign up for Thanks Bill for the next event in November 3rd. And it's free, just like today's was, but I wanted to do that. So, and those normally sell for retail price of $60. So if you go and sign up now, the link is in the chat. And so feel free to go do that. Wendy's going to put that in the chat. Also, because we offer these free, if you feel you've received value today and you want to donate somewhere, Blind Beginnings is a local charity. They deal with youth and families of children who are blind or visually, what's the word she uses? Partially sighted. That's it. Or there's an African organization that helps young women with their period products. And that's such an important thing. So we also want you to stay connected with Myself. We have a survey on our site. I'd love for people to take a few moments to do that because we want to know what you need. Then we can be more responsive, especially with these kinds of programs, etc. Visit the website, subscribe to our monthly Mindful Moment, be in our community, and follow our social media. So I'm going to stop sharing screen now. Thank you for being a part of that. And we are right at 11 o'clock, which is great. So before we move into the Q&A, if somebody had to leave, what's one thing from each of you practitioners that you would say as a recommendation? What would you leave them with? Dr. Nilima, what's one thing that you would say?
Get back to basics, to get your breathing, hydration, sleep, sunlight exposure, movement right, and then get your nutrition from the best possible quality food you could get. Real food,
Thank you.
one ingredient.
Thank you. Sandra.
Remember to breathe. A lot of times I hold my breath, and I've seen clients hold their breath. And remembering to breathe just helps you relax a little bit. It provides oxygen for all of your cells, including your brain, and it helps digestion work better.
Thank you. Bev.
So I think the biggest thing is to have compassion for yourself. You know, that it's very important to identify the parts of us that are sabotaging our efforts. Also being really loving ourselves, every little part of us, and taking things slow and being curious, learn about those parts and how we can support them more. That fearful part, the part that's wants to be busy all the time and doesn't want to rest, you know, like really, really delve into the parts and understand them better and support them, and then give yourself compassion. You know, don't have to do it all overnight. You know, sometimes I have people come see me and we go through nutrition stuff. The next day they throw everything out of their kitchen and then they have nothing to eat. And then what do you do?
Exactly. One step at a time. Thank you. That's beautiful. I see most people are staying with us. So let's continue into the Q&A. I see some fast and furious in the chat. And I have one that I want to bring up from earlier, and then we'll get into some of these. Also, feel free, people, to raise your electronic hand. Go to the reactions and raise your electronic hand, and then we'll see you that way. There is some new information around that kale is not good for our gut health. It's not good for our gut. Who would like to comment? Dr. Neelima, I see you nodding your head vigorously. Can you respond to that, please?
Actually, it's not new. We've always known it. And the problem is that any kind of plant that you eat doesn't want to be eaten. It creates chemicals and toxins to stop you from eating it, and eating it in large quantities. And plants are smart. Plants are actually living creatures as well. They know when they're being eaten. The way around it is to not just eat it all the time. And just because it's good for you doesn't mean you eat a lot of it all the time. So we get around changing greens. So you don't eat the same thing. If you eat kale on one day, you don't eat it again for 3 or 4 or 5 days. You only repeat it after you've had other greens in between. And that rotation of greens allows your gut to not get exposed to the same toxin again and again and again. So any green is not just kale, and it's not new.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't see any hands raised, but there was another one about alcohol. We haven't brought, we'll get to Ruth in one moment. Alcohol. We have not talked about alcohol. Bev, go for it.
I just wanted to add something about your greens. If you're adding apple cider vinegar or some kind of lemon or some kind of acidic environment, it actually really helps with the absorption of the minerals out of those greens. So it's something that can help when you're rotating through.
That's great. And I know that I do an olive oil and lemon dressing on my salad, and it just makes all the 15 or 20 vegetables I have every day taste so good. It just activates all the flavors. Great. Ruth, you have your hand up. Please unmute, and we'd love to see you if you could be on camera as well. Are you able to come off? Mute. Okay, we'll come back to her. While you're figuring out your tech, Jen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there any truth to the fact that our food should be cooked and that it's not easily digested when it's eaten raw? And I had also heard, I didn't know about the acids with the greens, but I had heard like to cook your spinach or your greens with oil, and that helps you absorb the vitamins. Could you comment on that?
Sandra.
Cooking can help to break down some of the difficult components. There are some things that have oxalates, and I'm not sure if kale has oxalates. I know spinach has a lot of oxalates, but oxalates can build up to cause crystal formation. And so those are not actually removed by cooking or by the acids. So if there are people who traditionally eat a lot of spinach salads, for example, you may have an overload of oxalates. And so reducing consumption is the way to go. I have not heard of effective ways to remove them once the overaccumulation of oxalates has occurred in the body.
Thank you. Bev, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say, there's, they're water soluble. I would suggest we always need to support liver and kidney, right? Those are the two places where we have elimination, and the water soluble ones are extracted in the body through the kidney. So lots of great kidney herbs. Luckily, some of the ones that I talked about are fantastic kidney herbs, and that's plantain and echinacea. Corn silk, you get some organic corn and you dry the corn silk and you can just use that. That's a fantastic supportive herb. There was this amazing study that they actually showed that it also lowers anxiety in people with PTSD. And that just shows that, hey, yeah, if your membranes are happy, then your nervous system's going to be happier too. And corn silk's really good for that.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm looking, Ruth, I see you're off mute, but I also see your question in the chat. So I'm going to read that out. If you want to add something, you can. So even though she's going through therapy now, trying to take care of her mental health, great. Kudos to you for seeking help. That's awesome. Her mental health is affecting her physical health. Will this be enough to take care of her gut and gastritis along with the good diet we're suggesting here? Do you have any other suggestions for Ruth? Which one of you would like to respond to that?
I can respond in a similar way to what I wrote to her in the chat. It can be really complicated. There are some people who have diagnosable health conditions that are pretty significant, and it can take people decades of working with doctor after doctor, doing all kinds of tests, and it's hard to tell exactly what it is that's going on. Hopefully your case is not that complicated, but for some people it's a long journey. So my assumption is that you have healthcare providers that you are working with, hopefully what I think of as being like functional medicine practitioners, as opposed to doctors that just prescribe and do surgery or send you out the door saying you're okay, go away. To help you actually really be able to identify what deficiencies there might be. There could be, mold or other toxins or, so many different things can be contributing to it. And as we've been talking about all day, your gut health is the center of all of your health. So if it's not working well, it's going to affect everything else. So it's a priority to get it addressed.
Thank you. And I would add, yes, and I'll come to you in 1 second, Bev. I would say for Ruth, you might want to talk to somebody like Bev and have a consultation, because she can have an in-depth exploration of your system and say, okay, let's try these herbs, and then let's do some, we haven't even got into it today, dark field microscopy or live blood analysis, which is so informative about the state of your current well-being. You can actually see it on the screen because your little drop of blood is a microcosm or a hologram of what's happening in your whole system. But talking to somebody like Bev or Dr. Anita Tanis, who was on another call and will be on our next one, those kinds of appointments could make all the difference in your life. Bev, go for it.
The big thing is that I was going to just say that our bodies are really complex, meaning that every time you make a change, the whole system changes. Yes. So the thing about health is that it's not one or two or three or even four things we do. It's almost like all the stars need to align for the process to be able to happen. And I think for every single person, that's unique as far as what they need, and that the keys that will unlock the door to be able to bring the person back into a more healthy state. And so I would urge you, Ruth, to make sure that you're talking to people who you really resonate with, They really feel like not only themselves, but the treatments they're doing really resonate with you, because that is going to make a huge difference in how you respond to the therapy. It's not just, do I have to do digestion and this and that, like I'm doing all the pieces. What you are doing, it has to really resonate with you, because then that changes your energetics so that it can actually work.
Thank you so much. Now, we've had 2 questions. People are reminding me in the chat. Thank you for that. One about bone broth and one about mold. And then Rusty, can you put your hand up so that after I can make sure that we cover all your questions? So bone broth, and let's do mold first. If people have experienced mold, what should they be doing about that? Dr. Neelima, do you have any comments? And you can say no if you don't. No? Okay.
I don't have any experience.
Okay. Bev or Sandra, which one of you could, maybe Bev, go for it.
I can talk about that a little bit. I mean, living on the West Coast, we all have mold.
Yes.
Cold, damp, lots of mold. I mean, there are a lot of different testing labs that can actually test your environment to look at molds. And then having those moldy areas actually remediated, cleaned up. And it is quite a chore to be actually to be able to do that. But then we're looking at internally through that dark field and the pleomorphism that I was talking about. There are Aspergillus niger is black mold, and there are remedies that I presently get from Germany, and Health Canada is blocking them, of course, because they work. So hopefully I will get them back at some point, but they are specifically utilized to transform the Aspergillus into a beneficial form that supports our body. So there are a lot of treatments that you can do beyond, again, they have antibiotics and the heavy antimicrobials and all the rest that can allow for a negotiation. And I would say that all of the things that we talked about for digestive health and mental, emotional health, all those pieces still really, really matter, because if we have membranes that are better barriers, then the mold that we are in and around won't affect us as negatively as if we're not in a healthy state.
Great. Thank you, Bev. And I'm going to move on to Rusty, because you've got a couple of questions there, one about bone broth, and I think that would be very valuable. Please take yourself off mute.
Yeah, I make bone broth all the time. In fact, I quickly got a cup when we're sitting down for here. And I've heard that the bone broth is exceptionally good for our gut. So I just wanted to know if that was something that you were in agreement with, and what ways do we make it better? Like I simmer mine for 2 or 3 days in the crock pot, keep it a rolling boil. I add apple cider vinegar to it. So any other tips on how?
I saw a heart from Dr. Neelima. Sandra, do you do bone broth? Yeah.
Yes. So quality of bones matters.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that yours comes from a clean source. So, and as many joints as possible, because the cartilaginous surfaces and the joint tissues gives you quite a bit more of what's really valuable from the bones rather than the bony part. The bony part provides minerals and stuff, but most of the real value comes from the joint sections. Think about, if you have a cow and you've got a knee joint, all the cartilage, ligaments, tendons, all that stuff, you consume it and it becomes joint material in your body.
Oh, cool.
So the more joints you have, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I add a little bit of apple cider vinegar in to draw out some of the value. You don't need a lot, but it does help. Some people like putting vegetables and herbs like carrots and celery and onions. I don't bother.
Yeah.
Some people brown the bones first. I don't bother.
No.
I just put them in there and cook them over and over and over again and pull the stuff out and freeze it.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you, Bev. I've got Bev. You want to say something?
Yeah,
here
just a
too?
really quick thing. There is a concept called oral tolerization that's used in medicine all the time. And you know how you can buy supplements that are shark cartilage or chicken cartilage or whatever. And it's generally for autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. And basically, when you take a bone broth, it works exactly like that. It's pulling the immune system away from the receptors that are attacking your own joints by having those molecules of cartilage, another mammalian cartilage molecule in your body, then it kind of pulls it away from the joint that's being affected if it's autoimmune arthritis.
Thank you. And how long do you cook? I heard Rusty say she cooks it several days. How long do you recommend? Several days in your slow cooker? 1 day? 12 hours? I hear different opinions.
I use a glass pot
Yep.
because I don't like any potential metal getting into it. And I just have it continuous. I have like a big stock of bones and I just do it, and then I pull the liquid out, put it in freezer containers. As the bones disintegrate, I pull those out and put more in. So it's just running continuously for sometimes a couple of weeks at a time. And then I have my freezer all nice and full. But yeah, I just go until the bones can be squished. They're soft enough that they start to crumble.
Fantastic. And so to address Melanie's, she dislikes the smell of bone broth cooking. So I like Sandra's advice. Do it all at once, do a whole pile, do it in the freezer, and then you can just reheat single servings all at one time. So that's great. And there was another question about autoimmune. And Jen was asking, I know, Sandra, you put an answer in there too. Dietary advice for ankylosing spondylosis. Bev, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, my husband has ankylosing spondylitis, so I've got lots of experience with this. It's all the same gut stuff because because the microbiome is so important, our immune system is so important in the digestive tract, that it's all the same gut things. With ankylosing spondylitis, there's a marker called HLA-B27, and what has been identified is that the Klebsiella bacteria in the large intestines has been overgrown, and so Klebsiella is fed by starches. And so a diet that's very, very low in starches, like I would take out grains altogether and legumes and only use root vegetables as your starch source. And what we did for years with my husband is also do the food combination, because food combination, which is that avoiding starch and animal protein together, it really improves the motility of the gut and it makes the food so much more digestible. It doesn't mean that you can't have animal proteins, and it doesn't mean you can't have starches, but you just don't put them together. And that's what our typical North American diet is. So ankylosing spondylitis, you want a lot of immune modulators. Echinacea comes to mind as one of my favorite ones, and it's readily available. There are many, many things you can do with ankylosing spondylitis, and that oral tolerization is one of them, the bone broths.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, I know there's a comment from Scheherazade. She's a doctor from Iran. Scheherazade, if you could put your camera on, that would be amazing. She said something in here about insulin resistance and the microbiome. I can't find it in here right now, but how does insulin resistance affect our gut microbiome? Bev, I'd love you to maybe respond to that.
Yeah, my first thought, it's kind of the other way around, because it's the gut microbiome that affects the insulin resistance, right? And so really, if you can think about the immune system in the digestive tract, when we are in inflammation mode, cortisol goes up. And when cortisol goes up, it suppresses insulin. And so then what happens is we become hyper and then hypoglycemic. So we go through all these stages of up and down, hyper and hypoglycemic. And as the cortisol is raised over time for a long period of time, we may go into adrenal fatigue. And then what happens is that our cortisol is low. So insulin goes up really without limit. And then we get hyperinsulinemia. And that's that wired and tired stage where every single piece of starch that turns into sugar is now around our midline, and we get that lovely muffin top type thing happening. We turn into apples when we have insulin resistance, and that all is a result of the microbiome going awry and not having adequate digestive function and optimum health in the digestive tract, for sure. And that's where I was mentioning that those berberines, or the Oregon grape root, is fantastic for managing both of those things.
Wow, I'm gonna have to watch this whole thing again because just so much has come out in here. I can't absorb it all at one time. Pardon the pun. There's another question here. Scheherazade, I hope that answered your question. There's another question from Rusty in here. Do you think that blood type has anything to do with it? And Dr. Neelima, I see shaking your head. Can you comment?
Even before blood type, you're first a human being. So human beings formed first. So you got to meet your needs as a human being, all your cellular needs first. It doesn't matter which blood type you're still going to need optimal nutrition on all counts. It doesn't matter what your blood count is. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female, doesn't matter, whether you're Asian or Chinese or European. Your cells need nourishing as a human being first. You have
Great.
certain nutritional needs which cannot be met, by following any other diet, then that's what's right for human cells.
Thank you, Dr. Neelima. Go ahead, Beth.
Sorry, just really quick. The one thing that I did find interesting with Paul Diamo and his book about blood types is the evolution of the blood type. So there may be something there that the O's, being hunters and gatherers, are more in tune with that type of diet. Not saying it's like you should never have this or that, but it was interesting to me about, I had never really thought about our blood types, our blood types evolving. And so I have found some people that have had some success with, loosely using the blood type recommendations.
Awesome, thank you. And we've got a quick question here. Sandra, maybe you could do this one. Radishes and beets, do they increase your liver's bile production? Do you know this?
Bev probably knows better. She dressed the radishes and said it's not helping bile. I wouldn't use beets for that, but I don't know. Bev,
okay, Bev, back to you.
Yeah, beets are definitely a fantastic liver herb. They're also pretty sweet, so you just have to really watch with that. But they are considered a fantastic liver medicine. And the radishes, as we were saying, they're more pungent, so they have a different quality because of the essential oils in them than beets. So you just have to be more careful because they have a tendency, if there's inflammation, to create more inflammation, whereas beets are generally anti-inflammatory. They have, of course, a lot of starch and mucilage, so they're soothing rather to the liver and to the digestive tract as a whole.
Great. So, and I put the 5 tastes again. I had included salty, but I don't think it is. So pungent, astringent, sweet. Oh, I put sweet in twice. Bitter, and what's the other one?
I think salty is in there for sure.
Okay, so salty should be in there. I put sweet twice. So I think one of the keys that we're learning here is incorporate all 5 of those things. That's very Ayurvedic in principle. Make sure your diet includes all of those regularly. And so that we focus so much on sweet. It's really interesting. Virginia has her hand up, and I want to make sure, let's do Virginia, and then I have a question just about things we should be watching for that tell us, if we don't know, that our gut microbiome or that our digestion is off. Virginia, first over to you. And Sandra, your headset's buzzing.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, the question I have is about celiac. My son started throwing up 20 years ago, and that was after he'd had a serious accident that affected his spine and everything. And there is one spinal spot that causes throwing up. So we attributed it to that for years, but just recently he discovered that if he quit bread, the throwing up stopped. But he loves bread, so he indulged once in a while, and then he overindulged once and got super sick and couldn't keep anything down. Nothing. Everything came back up. And we finally found one thing, New Plus, Sunrider New Plus, that would stay down, that kept him alive until he could start keeping food down. So he's on the mend, but I'm just wondering what else he might do to, because he's never been diagnosed as celiac, but it's pretty obvious from just the observations we've made ourselves that he eventually developed celiac, possibly celiac disease. And he's does he have to live with that forever? Is there something he can do to turn that around? What does he need to do going forward?
Bev, I know you. Oh, Sandra, go ahead, and then Bev, I know you want to jump in.
I know a lot about this. So celiac is a specific diagnosis, and he may have it, he may not. They diagnose it with a biopsy. For celiac to have occurred, basically all of the little villi in the small intestine need to be basically dead. And so you have like a shag carpet or just like a Berber, just like a flat. So that means that the small intestine just isn't working properly. That's diagnosed celiac, but he can be sensitive to gluten and not necessarily be technically celiac. So the way things work with the antibodies to the gluten, any exposure to it can activate the autoimmune response for 6 months to a year. So for him, it could well be that completely eliminating all forms of gluten, not just wheat, but all of the others as well, may be necessary. When people have this, they can be cross-reactive to dairy and to a whole variety of different things. So it could be just completely eliminating the wheat, may be enough to make a big difference, but any exposure can really set it off. So here's a story for a bunch of people who are into storytelling. Somebody who I know has a partner and she is celiac. She had been completely clean for years, and they went to a restaurant and she got what was supposedly a gluten-free roll. And she ate it and it caused all of the digestive symptoms, all of the elimination and all of the stuff. And it was technically gluten-free, but it was made in a bakery that makes wheat products. So one speck of wheat is enough potentially to set off that autoimmune reaction. So for your son to just completely eliminate and then see how it goes.
Thank you, Sandra. Bev, I think you have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, all of the things we talked about, the gut healing is a really, really important piece because, as Sandra said, the crypts that actually allow you to absorb your food out of the small intestines, they're no longer, maybe even if it's not celiac, they're partially obliterated. So he's not absorbing the nutrients out of his food. So very, very, very important thing to do is to rebuild that digestive tract. That's always a thing, not always, but many, many times it's missed. Yes, taking out the food is very, very important. But then we have to heal the gut. We have to heal that digestive tract. So the crypts are working again so he can absorb the nutrients out of his food. And there's a lot of different testing that he can do to see if what type of intolerance that he has. But I would suggest that that's done after he has at least 3 months of active gut healing, finding a local practitioner that can help you with that. Because the cells in the gut, we get completely new ones every month. So every month you have a whole new batch of cells in your digestive tract. So if we think about with mutations, we need at least 3 to 6 months of healing before the crypts are back into a state that they can function again. And I do tests for food intolerance. The big ones that come up, the 3 biggies that would be suggested he takes out, dairy, eggs, and gluten, they come up over and over and over again. And it doesn't have to do the test, but if you can take those out, then it can make a really big difference while you're healing, get somebody to help you with healing the gut.
Thank you. I'd like to comment on that. There's probably going to be a lot of resistance to that, because when you say to somebody, take out dairy, take out bread or all wheat products and eggs now go live and eat, and they're especially somebody who is probably not necessarily going to be doing that as their first order of business is probably going to have some resistance. So,
well, they have to be ready to do it, so they have to be sick enough to be ready to do it. And I just want to tell you guys, I've had people wait 10 years before they come to see me because they've heard that I'm going to make them take stuff out of their diet.
yeah, so they might be resistant. Sandra, you were going to say?
Ready. Have to be ready.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about why wheat and dairy are so addictive. And they're addictive.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really hard for people to give up their favorite food. So when you consume gluten, the breakdown products of gluten create gluteomorphins. You know about endorphins. Those are our natural body chemicals that are just this experience of love and joy. Gluteomorphins are very similar to endorphins. So they create this addictive response to wheat. The same thing with dairy. Casein breaks down to casomorphins. So this is part of why it can be so hard to give those foods up. Knowing that might help if that's something that your son or anyone needs to do.
Well, as for giving up eggs and dairy maybe, but eggs, like he's been adding foods back, only the ones that stay down. And eggs are the one of the few foods that he's able to keep down. So many of them come back up. And since you're mentioning not doing any wheat, a lot of meat is fed grains. Like cows, pigs are fed grains. So the sensitivity to certain meats, I suppose that's there too. I've heard of that with people who do have a celiac diagnosis that can't eat anything that ate grains either. So, but he's found that he can eat certain meats as long as he stays away from the gristle or toughness, the tough parts, and that'll stay down. So that's his big indicator right now, is whether or not the food stays down or comes back up. Then he avoids it because it's not going to work.
Thank you, Virginia. We'll have some comments. I just want to be aware of the time. We're just after 11:30. We're having such a fabulous discussion. I'm happy to keep going. Practitioners, are you happy to keep going for another few minutes, or do you need to break? Yeah. You're happy to keep going? Okay, awesome. If you need to leave, any participants, feel free to do so, but we're going to keep going. So any thoughts about what Virginia's last comment was? Bev?
Eggs are really, they stagnating to the liver, and they're really, really hard on the liver. And I would suspect that the liver, the pancreas, the gallbladder, all of those things are inflamed along with the digestive tract. I also understand that it's one of the very few things that he can eat. I was just writing in the chat that there's a supplement called DGL, and it's basically licorice that's had their licorice has a tendency to increase blood pressure, and it's had that part taken out of it. And they come in chewable tablets, and that is incredible at healing the entire digestive tract, but particularly the stomach. And because he's throwing up, it suggests that the problem is coming from the stomach, that it's not even getting as far as small intestines. He's throwing up right away. So that's just the last comment that I have about that.
So that's licorice.
I'm writing it in the chat for you. I've got it.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'll get that out of there.
I highly recommend that everybody save the chat. There is a lot of good gold in the chat today. So if it just go to the very bottom of your chat, see the little happy face and the 3 dots beside it. I'm saving it. If you can't get it for some reason because you're on a phone or a tablet, let me know and I'll email that to you later. So great, Virginia, your little bit is in there. And any other questions before we move into, oh yes, Lee, go for it.
What do you know about diabetes type 2s? Because I know it's gut. So can you share? Thank you.
Bev, Why don't you take it away?
Yeah, we talked about that as it's basically insulin resistance that we talked about in relationship to the cortisol and the insulin going high and then causing the problem. So it was, we did talk about it in relationship to the gut. So still the same gut healing, insulin resistance, and will lead to metabolic syndrome, syndrome X, they kind of call it, and then leading into diabetes type 2.
So you mentioned corn silk. How do you take it as a tablet or capsule or
the silk you can actually take off of corn and then dry it and then make it into a tea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I've been throwing that away.
Yeah, don't throw that part away. And especially if you're buying organic corn. Yeah. Hold on to the silk, man. It's gold.
Oh my gosh. We're gonna do that for sure. Thank you.
Excellent.
Rusty.
Thank you.
Okay. I also was listening. I think it was Dr. Nalima, or was it Sandra, talking about the cloud of our microbiome around, and even a microbiome on fingernails. My fingernails have been disgustingly unhealthy for ages. They split horizontally and vertically, and they just are terrible. So what is my microbiome missing, if it's possible, zero in on that? Because I eat pretty healthy, I have a pretty good digestive system, but something I'm doing must not be right.
Any comments? Probably Bev. This is probably back over to you.
Oh yeah, no, but I think it's actually the bone broth thing that Sandra was talking about, that it really has to do with collagen. And nails are an extra. So if our body is taking up a lot of energy, and that's usually the digestive tract, when it's in good shape, it takes about a third of all of our energy requirements go to the digestive tract. So if you have even a disrupted digestive tract, it's even more. I find I've had some success with they're kind of meal replacements, but they have all the vitamins in them. One's called MediClear. There's a bunch of companies that make them, but they have L-glutamine in it, because L-glutamine does really heal the gut quickly. But it's more about the bone broths and getting the collagen and the minerals and the nutrients that
I'll just drink more of my bone broth then.
Yeah, because Rusty, I know Rusty drinks a lot of bone broth for sure. So that's interesting.
Regularly, but I'm gonna, Sandra, I was doing it like you regularly. I think I had one more question, and if somebody else wants to go, I'll find my last question here.
Okay, so what are some of this, Dr. Nilima? Go for it.
Some of your symptoms may be related to menopause, because decreasing estrogen levels is directly correlated with poor quality nails. And also we know from studies on menopausal women that your quality of your skin, hair, and nails is directly correlated with your cardiovascular system. So your vascular health is also determined by your gut health, which is also reflected in your skin, hair, and nails. Now, I discovered, and this is just my personal experience, when I started training in functional martial fitness, functional Indian martial arts, it involves a lot of twisting movements, compression and expansion of the gut and the chest. And that changes the blood flow to your gut. And when that happened, my nails dramatically improved within 3 months, even though I'm menopausal.
Twisting movement.
Yes, the compression and expansion. So a lot of twisting your elbow to your knees, a lot of the cross body movements, bilateral movements, because our body, the other thing, where Sandra was talking about energy, one of the things that happens with energy is you need bilateral stimulation. Something about right and left movements makes a big difference to your alignment, your spinal alignment, your muscular alignment, the symmetry between your bodies. The way your autonomic nervous system works, the way your gut health works. So having movements that actually stimulate right and left makes a big difference to compression. And when you do your compression movements from right to left, so doing Supermans and doing elbow to knee exercises, compressing both your elbows outwards, doing repetitive movements, not just one or two. And particularly in yoga and a lot of ancient Indian martial arts, there's 108 is a magic number. And I used to think, it's just like silly, what's 108? But I discovered that the moment you cross And it's not 108, it can be 116, it can be 124. It's you recognizing inside your body what the count is. And when you cross a certain count, something in your body shifts and changes energetically, movement-wise. And you find that there's a flow state that happens between the right and left movements that completely changes how your body responds. There's
so
something about
interesting.
that number that changes
Yeah.
your body.
Because intuitively, I love it when my yoga program makes me, take my opposite knee to my opposite elbow and
Yes,
from the plank
yes,
position to do that, or from the,
yes.
So,
And
Our
I've been
body
oceans.
responds to bilateral movement a lot. And that's where, when, what's her name? I'm forgetting her name now. EMDR, the lady who discovered EMDR, eye movement desensitization. Yeah, she kind of made it a theory and a practice, and she made a protocol out of it. But we've known for, ever since we evolved, that bilateral movements are important. Look at all dance, look at all kinds of martial arts, look at all kinds of evolution of human movement is bilateral. It's right and left, and it moves from side to side. Even dance movements, the most rhythmic ancient folk dances emphasize right and left movements, swaying movements, and they're repetitive.
Thank you, Dr. Neelima. Bev, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, I'm just writing in the chat. Yeah, I've been swimming in the ocean for the last 3 years, and that's like the perfect, when you were saying compression and bilateral movements, that's like the perfect movement. It's the perfect movement to get you supported in the water, and so your joints don't have all the compression, and just the nature of the way you swim and kick, it's all bilateral, and you're compressing and then expanding. So yeah, when you said that, that totally makes sense. And I'll do like 1,000, 1,500 strokes in a swim, so that's going way over your 100. So yay, we all have to swim in the ocean.
That's great. Oh, so I again, conscious of time, unless someone has burning questions, what should people be paying very clear, close attention to regarding their digestive systems? What are the signs? We've covered some, but in summary, what should they be looking at for indicators for digestive health? Let's start with Sandra. What do you say people should look at?
Something we haven't talked about is sleep. So when you eat relative to when you're waking up and sleeping actually really matters. So if you're eating too close to bed, think about it, your body's not going to be able to digest that properly. But some people, if they are having a hard time staying asleep, might not be getting enough carbohydrates shortly before sleep because their body's running out and that's waking them up. So intermittent fasting is just amazing if you're able to do it. Stretch the time between the times when you eat.
Thank you, Sandra. Dr. Neelima.
I think getting back to the basics, again, basically breathing, hydration, movement, sunlight expert. Getting into the circadian rhythm is a big important thing for gut health. And like Sandra said, not eating just before bedtime.
And how do people know if they're not getting enough of those basics from your point of view?
I think it affects their energy, their mood. It's two things really important. The quality, obviously, the quality of sleep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bev.
When I'm talking about digestion, asking questions in a consultation, I'll often ask, frequency of bowel movements, and if they change from soft to hard, this variability, if people are bloated, do they get acid reflux? Like all of those things shouldn't happen. And a number of times people will blame it on their genetics. Oh, my parents had this, but you also learn how to eat from your family. So it could also be the habits that you take on. So, our body loves rhythms, and a healthy digestive system has got a consistent, predictable rhythm that you can rely on. And so it's looking at those things and really assessing whether you do have a nice rhythm to your digestive function. I think it's a place to start to look and see if there's something that you could do to fine tune things a little bit.
Thank you so much. You have been wonderful, Sandra, Bev, and Dr. Neelima, for jumping in and having no preparation. That's been wonderful. And we send blessings to Ariel and Zia. And I hope that everything is okay with her. So continue to have them in your thoughts and send love and healing. And thank you to each one of you who've been here. These are always marathons of fantastic information. And we so appreciate your time, your questions, your interest, your engagement in the chat. And we'd love to stay in touch with you because we truly, truly want to know what you need so we can serve you better in the world. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend. And for those of you who are watching the recording, eat real good food. That's the basic of everything. And reach out to our practitioners. They will all do online consults if you're not in our area, which is in BC, or in the case of Dr. Neelima in India, you can reach all of them, and we've put their information in the chat, and they will be available on our website too. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
We're so glad you're with us, and we're doing this because you matter.